tossers have thrown it out the door with their behaviour this week. They should be ashamed of themselves. They should absolutely look at themselves in the mirror and wonder what the have they been doing. They're hissing at us and calling us cheats in the Lord's long room, and they have the gall to talk to us about the spirit of cricket. Absolute bullshit.
There's a big appeal that's hit him on the pad. He's out. Lions gone. New South Wales are 9 down onto Sydney Road, and it's hit a car. Oh, I think it's hit a car. What a way to bring up your 50.
All you want is to leave it all behind. Now there is a simple remedy to stay fit for all eternity.
Oh, hi everybody, it's Manners here, and I'm coming to you from outside Perth Stadium. How exciting. We are just one day away from the most anticipated Ashes series in a long, long time. And I'm in Perth, and there are tons of English tourists everywhere. And I can't wait to see their hearts get broken when Scotty Boland, Brendan Doggett, Mitchell Starc and Nathan Lyon run through that flimsy, slogging lineup that England are going to produce. Well, lots to talk about. As you can hear, there's lots of background noise here in Perth as they test out the sound systems. We've had the captains' press conferences. So the big news is Australia have given us their team. England are yet to name their 11. They're waiting to see how the pitch looks, or they're going to talk this afternoon. So we don't know yet what England are going to do, but Australia have named their 11. And there will be 2 test debutants for this test match. Jake Wetherald makes his debut opening alongside Usman Khawaja. This is a great story. A player that's been in and out of cricket, had to move states, had his challenges, but he's 31 years old. He had a huge Shield summer last year, and it's the right time for him to make his debut, and a good pitch for him to make his debut. He's a strong square of the wicket player. He's had success over here in Shield cricket, so playing on the Optus or the Perth Stadium pitch will suit his game nicely. And look, when I think about Wetherald's debut, I think about players like Hussey, Voges, Chris Rogers that came in their 30s and made an impact at test level. Even recently we saw Bo Webster do it down the order. So Wetherald knows his game, and although it'll be a big occasion for him, he does come in with a pretty solid game plan. And he's a nice foil for Usman Khawaja because, you know, he's an aggressive batter. He'll keep the run rate up and he'll put some pressure back on the England bowlers. So Wetherald to debut, that means Webster misses out. And look, he's not the first Australian cricketer that's unlucky to miss out, but I think in the end Australia have done the right thing. The batting lineup looks a lot better when you have Marnus at 3 and Green at 6, especially with no Cummins at 8. You know, Green's a heavy-duty test player. And look, if you're being realistic, Green is just a better player than Webster. If you match those two up as a number 6 all-rounder, Green just has Webster. Doesn't mean Webster's not a fantastic cricketer, and he's done really well for Australia, and I think we'll see him back in the team, but I think this is the right call for Australia. They've got a solid lineup now with Marnus at 3, Smith at 4 and Head at 5, and then you've got Usman opening with Wetherald, and Green at 6 is someone who can just hold that lower order together and hold together the tail if needed. It's good to have Green between Head and Carey, who are both pretty much dashers, and you'll have, in the end, a solid player, like Cameron Green, coming in at 6, who's, made a couple of test centuries and batted higher up the order. So I think they've done the right thing. And as I said, there have been plenty of players who've done well for Australia, but then, unfortunately, due to the balance of the side, have been left out. I mean, you look at Adam Gilchrist, the greatest keeper batsman in history, but he missed out for a long time because of how good Ian Healy was. Stuart Law made one Test 50 on debut and was then dropped. Brad Hodd made a double 100 and was dropped a couple of Test matches later. So, there are tough calls in Australian cricket, and I think this is the right call. And it helps me sleep easier knowing that Marnus is not opening, knowing that Green's not at 3. Look, I think Green's a great player, but I still think he can get a bit clunky at number 3, and maybe he's not the ideal player. So, yeah, right call. Did the selectors stuff up in the fact that we've got Wetherald debuting in this huge test? Ideally you'd want Wetherald playing a few test matches before such a big series. I think they did stuff up. I think the selectors have made a real meal of the opening spot in the last few years. They indulged Warner for a long time. They're indulging Kawaja now. They did give Smith a chance to open. They opened with McSweeney. Then they brought Constas in. I mean, they've made a real meal of it. And, you know, I've said many times about that tour to Sri Lanka where Constas was dropped. I mean, that was a complete stuff-up. Say Constas goes to Sri Lanka and he fails in both test matches. Well, maybe Australia have the opportunity to take Wetherald to the West Indies and try and bed him down in the test team. Now, I know conditions there were very tough, but in the end, the Australian selectors have got this wrong. They've picked Wetherald on debut for an Ashes test, which is not ideal. But as I said, I'm trying to take the positives. There's so many cricketers that have come in their 30s and done well. I really hope Wetherald is one of them. And what a match to debut for him. It'll be unforgettable. But as I said, planning-wise, this has probably not gone the way the Australian selectors would have hoped or wanted. And a lot of this is their own making. They've stuffed around with the order. And in the end, we're now here with an untried opening combination for this first test match. Now, on Brendan Doggett, what a story he is. I've said before, he's of Indigenous background, so he's only the third Australian test player to play, third Australian Indigenous player to play for Australia at test level. So he's behind Jason Gillespie and Scott Boland. This is the first time there'll be two Indigenous players in the same 11 with Boland and Doggett, so that is really significant. Having two players in the 11 when we've only had three in history, that is fantastic. The other thing is, Brendan Doggett didn't come through the pathways. He's from Toowoomba, was picked up there bowling to James Hopes in a game, and at 21, I think, was thrown into the state system. So this is a bit of a nod to those cricketers that work hard, develop themselves, aren't overcoached, and aren't put on all these bowling load limitations, although Doggett's had a few injuries, but he's still at a point now where he's making his test debut. He's taken almost 200 first-class wickets at 26, but in the last few years he's been taking his wickets at around 20. He bowls a nice pace around 140 kilometres an hour, swings the ball away, and then can get the ball to seam back in. That's to the right-handers. So obviously swings into the left-handers and uses the angle across the lefties. But yeah, fantastic stuff to see Doggett debuting, and his last 3 years have been pretty special for South Australia. So yeah, let's see how he goes on test debut. It's really exciting having a quick bowler debuting in a test match. It hasn't happened for so long, and I mean, the last debut was probably Scott Boland, who took 6 for 7 at the G. So that was on debut. So imagine Doggett could do even half that. 3 for 3. 3 for 3 would be something. But yeah, he's ready, and that's, I guess, what you can say about Doggett and Wetherald, both 30-year-old players, and they should be ready. Smith, did his press conference, and there wasn't much in there. Alison Mitchell asked whether there was an update on Josh Hazlewood, and he said he didn't have one. No update on Josh Hazlewood, but he did say Pat Cummins is looking good for the second test match. I find that peculiar that they haven't heard about Hazlewood, but Smith said his focus has been purely on this match and the team they've got with them. So I'm sure the medicos and the coach are monitoring Hazlewood. But I guess in this case, no news is not good news, because normally when we don't hear from Hazlewood, or he gets a little niggle and you don't hear much from him, and then you just get a press release, he's missing the rest of the summer. So I hope that is not the case this time, because obviously we need him back in that attack for the rest of the series. But yeah, no update on Hazlewood. I guess the main talking point out of Steve Smith's press conference was he was asked about the comments by Monty Panesar, and he delivered Monty a savage sledge. He brought up when Monty Panesar appeared on Mastermind in the UK and gave some absolutely mind-bogglingly dumb answers to some of the questions. So Smith brought that up and basically made the comment that he doesn't really care what Monty thinks, and referred to, I guess, how stupid he was in Mastermind. But that was a very funny moment in the press conference, and a little bit of levity. And I think Smith had that one stored up and had that answer ready to go. And he absolutely took down Monty in a big, big way. As I said, I had a look at the pitch. It looks green and hard. And Smith didn't give too much away with regarding the pitch and the conditions. Then Ben Stokes did his press conference. Well, okay, here's the first thing. Before Ben Stokes did his press conference, Smith was asked, is Stokes the sort of player you don't want to fire up? Because if you fire him up, he can hurt you. And Smith sort of agreed. I mean, he didn't want to, I think, give Stokes too much credit, but yeah, he sort of agreed that he's a player you don't really want to fire up. So that being the question and the answer, I decided I'm not going to be the bloke that fires up Stokes in the press conference before the first test. Because the question I had for Stokes is, will you resign if you lose this series? But then I didn't want that just percolating in his head the whole time that, his job was on the line. Although it is, and I hope he does resign, and I hope they lose. But, I don't want to fire up Stokes. I heard from a little birdie within the England camp, in the 2023 Ashes, that my little rant after the Bairstow thing may have found its way to some of the English players, may have fired them up a little bit. Not my intention, of course, and a very unfortunate byproduct of my fury at the English and their terrible behaviour in the last series. So, I don't want to give them that, not that they really care what I say, but I wasn't going to be the one to fire up Stokes in that first press conference. I will say more of my frustration is at McCullum, because I think he was the one who stood there on the Lord's outfield wagging his finger at us and saying he wasn't going to have a beer with us. He could have poured cold water over everything right there and then and said the Aussies were 100% spot on in doing it, but he didn't. Anyway, old news. So Stokes did his press conference. He was asked, does he think the Aussie... Well, he was asked basically, does he think the teams will have a beer at the end of this series? He said yes, he thinks they will. So that's good. He was also asked whether, this series is the culmination of all his work as England captain and whether he'll be judged on this only. And basically, he said, which is a dumb answer, I don't think what happens in this Ashes will detract from what I've done for England over the last 4 years. And what a dumb answer. They've spent the last 4 years crapping on about this series. I mean, every other series they're asked about the Ashes, they say they're building up to the Ashes. They did it, wasn't it to the West Indies and India in the last couple of years? Just talked about the Ashes. And now he's saying, I won't detract. Of course it will detract. If you come and get spanked here 4-0 or 5-0, you should resign, and it will mean the last 4 years, although you've won some pretty soft games, in the end it's culminated in nothing. So it will detract, absolutely. Whereas if you come here and win, then it'll be seen as this heroic performance. I'm not sure what Stokes is on about, but I guess he's got to tell himself that, and that's why I didn't want to ask him the question about resigning. But yeah, of course, this is how Bazball will be judged. This series. Bazball was born from the ashes of the 21-22 series, and it has been building up to this moment. Hasn't won a major series yet, but if they can, even if they don't win, if they leave here 2-2, that'll be job well done. They won't have the Ashes, but they can hold their heads high when you look at the last series here. So, and if they get slogged, 4-0, 5-0, of course, it's all over for Stokes and Baz. Bad luck, boys. And just on the English squad, so they haven't named the 11. I think everything's pointing to a 5-pace attack with Wood, Archer, Cass, Atkinson and Stokes. But Bashir's obviously in the squad, and if they think the pitch will dry up and crack, maybe they will pick Shoaib Bashir for that test match. Stokes was asked about Mark Wood. He said he's absolutely flying. Of course he's going to say that, but he said he's bowling really quick, looking fit. So we will probably see Mark Wood. Well, we will see Mark Wood, I think, tomorrow with Archer taking that new ball. And how exciting is that going to be? Wood is up there with the quickest bowlers in the world, if not the quickest in world cricket at the moment. And that will be very, very exciting at Optus Stadium. And then Stokes, he was asked about how good Steve Smith is. And he said that he has Smith and Root neck and neck as the two best test batters in the world. And he was quite gushing in his praise of Smith. He said The one constant about Smith is he's always scored runs against England, and nothing's changed in his 15-year career. So we'll see about that. But yeah, so that's it. It's, Perth Test day -1. I've been chatting with some of the other journos and some of the English touring media. So the build-up is palpable. Everyone is sick of all the chatter. They just want it to get going. The first day is completely sold out. Day 2 is approaching a sellout, and there's sellouts all around the country. So, yeah, this is one of the most anticipated series in living memory, and I can't wait. Well, the big news is we have an 11 for the Australians, Wetherald and Doggett to debut. Unluckily, Bo Webster misses out. But yeah, and just for the daily wraps for these Ashes matches. So I'll be coming to you after each day of the Perth Test match. Can't wait for that. And then for the other Test matches, which I'm not travelling to, I'll also be going live on YouTube straight after play, and I'll be having guests from all around the world joining me for those daily wraps. So, if you want great Ashes coverage, if you want unique Ashes coverage, if you want a perspective you won't get anywhere else. I mean, everybody's doing a daily podcast now. I was the first one to do it many, many years ago, and everyone's finally caught on and copying me. So, yeah, we will be coming to you after every day of the Ashes. You'll get the unique Menace perspective on the game. Don't forget to get your Ashes t-shirts for summer. All the links are in the bio and the show notes, and you can get your Bairstow Walk t-shirt, your Moral Victory t-shirt, or your Baz and Stokes Unemployment t-shirt. But look, that's it. Coming to you from outside Perth Stadium. So hope you get some sleep before the first day. I mean, the whole country is ready for this. The whole country is ready for this. I know the English love their stupid football and all that. Well, cricket's our game, and we're about to show you how it's played.